Okay, we're recording.
Great. Hello, thank you for taking the time today to join us. My name is Eamonn Gilbert. I'm the Assistant Director for Commissioning for Special Educational Needs and Corporate Parenting in Surrey County Council. I'm going to talk today about our Next Steps programme, our Preparing for Adulthood programme that we introduced last year in Surrey, and we're looking to expand this year. I want to provide a little bit of context around our thinking behind it, the strategies and outcomes that we're hoping to achieve, and hopefully give you context and support in terms of planning your own arrangements around your young people's special educational needs as they approach adulthood. When we talk about preparing for adulthood, we're primarily talking about post-16 provision, but obviously that's something that will be relevant from year 11, possibly even younger, the year 9 review, but we'll talk about that in some more detail. I'm going to go through the slides. There are some videos embedded within the slides from some of our providers explaining the programs and the offers that we've commissioned this year, and again that we hope to expand in the future. I'm hopeful that the presentation will last about 45 minutes, and there'll be a period at the end where there'll be an opportunity for questions, I hope. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for joining us today. One of the things that we spent a lot of time this year working on, and we did some events, seems a long time ago now, in the autumn of 2019, was to really share some data that we've got within the local authority, which is very similar to other local authorities across the country, about young people with special educational needs and an education, health and care plan. I think there is often an assumption which goes back to the change in legislation in 2014, where the age around an EHCP rose from 19 to up to 25, that the majority of young people will have the support that they're currently getting till age 25. In a future slide, I'll show that that isn't actually the case. But I think more importantly, there isn't necessarily an understanding that the support young people get through their EHCP isn't a lifelong program in the vast majority of cases. And that's what this pie chart here is really demonstrating. As you can see, what this is showing is that from the current approximately 3,100 young people we've got in Surrey post-16 with an education, health and care plan, only about 11% of those will meet the threshold for adult services. By that, and my colleague Steve Hook, I believe, is doing a presentation as well, so you can go into this in more detail. But the legislation around the Care Act, which underpins the adult social care offer, is the threshold is much higher than it is for children's services and in the HCP. That means, in a kind of loose descriptor, really, is that for those young people that require support for the rest of their lives, they will be eligible for adult social care and will get that support for the rest of their lives. There is then another group there, about 5%, who have really significant and complex health needs, and they will get support from health services, the local CCGs, obviously for the rest of their lives as well. And that's an ongoing arrangement that we would have with the CCG. But what that means is that the vast majority of young people post-16 with an education, health and care plan will not get lifelong support and will not be accessing the targeted services that they are now forever. For many young people, it will end at 19, and at others, it will end at other stages. But what's really important is that even with the best possible outcome in terms of necessarily from a support perspective, no one will have an EHCP beyond the age of 25, because the legislation in the Children and Families Act makes it clear that at age 25, an EHCP expires. Therefore, if you're not going to be able to access adult social care, or you're not on the complex health pathway, I think it's fair to say that, certainly for the complex health pathway, we would probably be pleased that our children wouldn't be eligible for that pathway. They won't get lifelong support. That means it's really important that the incredible level of resource and support that's available now is making a meaningful difference to children and young people's adult outcomes, and that we are preparing them for adulthood. And Next Steps program, which I'll talk about in a moment, is really aimed at achieving that. But what's really important as well is that when we get to year 11, when we're talking about what young people want to do next, it's really important that the programs that they access are actually preparing them for their adult destination, and they're not just a repetition of what they've done before. and they aren't primarily geared around young people feeling comfortable and happy in their current environment. That's obviously really important, and we want to support that wherever we can. But really, when we get to post 16, we really need to ensure that they're on a pathway that will, a program that will support them in their future pathway. And for the 84% of young people with an EHCP who won't be open to adult social care, who don't have a complex health need, primarily that will be employment, or a pathway aligned with employment, possibly life skills or volunteering, but it won't be highly academic. And one of the things that we've tried really hard to do around the Preparing for Adulthood program, next steps, is to try and change the conversation around the post-16 transition, so that the question we're asking is, what do you envisage your child, or what does the young person themselves imagine themselves doing at 20? And what program, what resources can we deploy to achieve that with the support of the family and the young person, rather than what would you like to do next year? Because the tendency always, when you ask the question, what would you like to do next year, is, I would actually like to do the thing I've done previously because I quite enjoy it. But for all of us, the transition into adulthood can be difficult. There can be a level of anxiety, but that's partly about learning and growing. And there is always going to be an element of stress around that, which we understand and we want to try and support and manage. But it's really important that when we're moving into the post-16 sphere, that the program that the young person is signed up to, that we are supporting, is actually moving them towards that adult destination. One of the things that I think was really important to share with everyone today was just this chart. I think, as I said in the previous slide, the vast majority of young people with an EHCP, although the legislation says up to 25, it also is clear that ordinarily you wouldn't necessarily expect to have an EHCP beyond age 19. And these are our numbers for this academic year. And as you can see, over time, the number of young people in Surrey with an EHCP declines. That can often be because they're moving into adult services. It could be that their complex health needs means that they're just going to be fully supported, but with the by the CCG. And in many cases, it's because they've made a successful transition into employment. They no longer need an EHCP. And we also have a significant minority of young people with an EHCP in Surrey who actually make the transition to university. And at that point, the access arrangements there kick in and the EHCP automatically expires. But as I said previously, everyone's EHCP will expire at age 25. The legislation is clearly set out. It's not a lifelong support program. There are other services such as adult social care that provide that, but the EHCP is not a mechanism for that. And so it's really important that while a young person's got an EHCP, we maximise the resource and the benefit and the outcomes of that resource to ensure that we are really preparing them for the next step in their adult life. And, they will live for many, many years in Surrey. And it's really important that those years as well, beyond the EHCP, are really fruitful and beneficial. And as I say, you can see that there's a significant tail off as young people get older with EHCPs, and the numbers of EHCPs decline over time. One of the things we did as a kind of realization of that program or that scenario last year was we created the Next Steps program. So we wanted to actually create a program that was very much focused on children and young people around the post-16 transition for all young people, not just those that were making the transition to adult services, and that actually we were providing programs and support to help young people with an EHCP to make that transition. So we were clear that we wanted to support the National Preparing for Adulthood program, which is also set out in the legislation. But we felt that, preparing for adulthood was a bit of a mouthful, and it wasn't necessarily, I don't like the word brand, but it wasn't a brand that necessarily chimed with young people. So we did a consultation with SYAS, Send Youth Advisors Surrey. They went out and spoke to their group, and we met with them on a number of occasions, and we came up collectively with the name Next Steps, which we felt covered everyone that was going through a transition, whether it was into a health pathway, an adult social care pathway, or an employment pathway. That it was a nice way of describing that, and we wanted to ensure that was something that everyone was supported to do. And then we got some professionals in to do a little bit of branding. a Surrey employee. We didn't go out to a big agency or anything like that. I don't think we spent a fortune on it. And then so we came up with a Next Steps logo, and so all of our preparing for adulthood information has the Next Steps logo on it. There is a space on the local offer website, and we're looking to revamp that and to increase that profile for the upcoming academic year. And we're already beginning preparations around looking at what young people might be doing in September 21 for those that are in year 11 or potentially in a transition. Obviously, one of the things that changes at post 16, which can be a real driver for change, is that many of the provisions that the young people are at don't actually offer provision beyond year 11, and therefore a transition to a different destination or a different provision, working with a different school, college or provider, is also part of that transition for those young people, because clearly they can't stay at their provision any longer. And I think it's really important in your own scenario to know what the upper age range of the provision that your child's currently in, and be clear that at what age they might need to leave that provision, and give them some thought to where they might go next, through the prism of, you know, what would you like them to do as adults? What would they like to do as adults? And by that, I don't just mean those very generic pathways around adult social care, complex health and employment. For example, in the employment pathway, it might be a very specific industry or sector that they're interested in. We've got a lot of young people who want to do some of the further education colleges around game design, you know, sort of coding type approaches. And obviously we've got other young people who are interested in things like horticulture or some cases animal husbandry. You know, it's really important that it's a sector orientated approach. It isn't just about employment as this kind of big mesh, although there are underlying skills around employment that a lot of young people struggle initially to get to understand. For example, you know, arriving at work on time, etc., etc. There are some real generic skills that, you know, to some extent, I think many of us probably now take for granted and forget that that these were skills that we learned when we left school and went into employment. So we've done a lot of work over the past year around vocational pathways, and I thought it would be helpful. It sounds a very sort of jargonistic title, a vocational pathway, to just set out what that really means and what those programs look like. As I've said before, the vast majority of young people with an EHCP don't obviously keep that beyond up to 25, and they don't have an EHCP through to age 25. You know, they are actually age 19, many of them, completing the 2-year program that they may have started at 16. So the programs that are on offer are pre-supported internships, which offer a 5-day program of activity. They support young people at lower levels, entry level or level 1, and they are there to, if you like, help them to understand the world of work, understand what the world of work looks like, and of course be prepared and be very supported in that environment to make a very soft transition into what the world of work may look like. Supported internships, they're unpaid opportunities to experience the work setting and work for a minimum of 6 months. I should say that's a nationally accredited program, which is supported by the Education Skills Funding Agency. Anyone who's doing that would normally be doing that with a training provider or a college, and that is there's a program with a core curriculum that's clearly set out, but the vast majority of it is based on a long-term work experience program. It is unpaid, but it's intended to allow young people to get a sense of what the world of work is like. And it's quite popular because obviously it doesn't create a risk, if you like, for the employer. They're not signed up to contracted employment. There isn't any salary. But the young people on those programs, and I should have said for the pre-supported internship, retain their EHCP. So while they're doing those programs, they retain their EHCP, and there isn't any question that that would be removed. What we want to do is create an environment where people feel comfortable that these are programs that they want to access, but there isn't a sense of a cliff edge or, you know, some other scenario whereby, you know, you effectively give up your EHCP, and at that point then you find that program doesn't work for you and you're kind of in a limbo. We would support anyone to do any of these programs to retain their EHCP until such time as they felt that they'd completed the program and they were ready to move on. Traineeships, there aren't as many traineeships in Surrey as we would like. It's one of the things we're talking to our training providers about at the moment. A traineeship is similar to a supported internship. It's a slightly higher level. It's a shorter program. It's 6 weeks to 6 months. And for many young people, it's the stepping stone to an apprenticeship. So often an employer will enroll someone on a traineeship with the idea of it being a short program. And if they're successful, they would move them either into an apprenticeship in their own organisation, or in effect, we would have evidence from their performance that they're now ready for an apprenticeship. An apprenticeship is obviously the next level. They come at primarily at level 2 and level 3, although it can go higher than that. There is a salary there that's set out in national legislation. There is a contract which lasts for the period of the program, and normally a level 2 apprenticeship would take about 12 months, and a level 3 program, sorry, level 3 being equivalent to A level, level 2 being equivalent to GCS, 5 GCSEs. That would level 3 would probably take about 18 months to 2 years. And as I say, anyone undertaking any of those programs would retain their EHCP, and as I say, there is a contract there between the employer and the young person, and they would be involved in that. And we've done a lot of work this year, increasing the provider base. I've got some videos I'll show later about some people who've successfully embarked on these programs, and we've got a lot of very willing employers in Surrey, I'm pleased to say, who want to help us with that, and are offering those opportunities to young people with special educational needs and disabilities, and within EHCP. And then, of course, we've got a lot of college provision in Surrey. I think for a lot of people, college provision is a bit of a mystery. It is one of the key planks of the education system of the country, although because it's often lumped together with school sixth form provision in terms of under the umbrella of further education, not many of us are maybe as familiar with it as we ought to be. And it is often very vocationally aligned. And we've got 4 colleges in Surrey, and they all offer very vocationally aligned programs, which can lead to some of the things I've just talked about, but also offer themselves as a standalone and can be a pathway into employment as well. And what we've been doing over the past year is really looking to grow these provisions, commission extra places, have much better arrangements with our providers, and really see this as the way that, going back to that original pie chart, that we need to do much more to support young people to make that transition into employment at whatever age that's appropriate for them, assuming it is appropriate for them. And if it's not, then we've got other programs that obviously we can look at support. But bearing in mind that key scenario that I painted at the beginning, which is that everyone with an EHCP, at some point it will end, and we need to make sure those young people are as prepared for the adult pathway that they're on as they possibly can be, and use those resources as if it, as targeted and focused as we can, to ensure that they get the best out of those programs post 16. So we've commissioned some additional programs this year with providers that we weren't particularly using before, and I just wanted to quickly talk about those. We're going to go into that in more detail later. So Halo in Surrey is a program for young people who perhaps aren't initially going to be ready for employment. They're probably more on a life skills pathway, but maybe aren't going to quite meet the thresholds for adult social care. And by life skills, I mean the ability to live independently, travel independently, socialise mixed with friends, go to events, and they're relatively small groups. It's a very popular program. And this year, as I say, we've almost doubled the number of young people that we've got on that program, and we're hopeful that we're going to be able to do that again next year. One of the things I will say that has been and is a limiting factor in how quickly we can support these providers to grow their programs is that the quality of these programs is very high. And if we try and grow them too quickly, there's a danger that the quality will drop, and the experience for the young person won't be as good as we want it to be. So we are working hand in hand with the providers to grow them as quickly as they feel comfortable. Obviously, they have to recruit, etc., etc. But these are really programs that we want to grow. And the feedback from these programs has been great. Many of them have operated in Surrey for many years, but they haven't necessarily had children's services funding to support their programs, and that's a change that we've made last year. It's early in the academic year, so a lot of young people have only just enrolled in programs, but you can see from the data there that there are we've increased the number of young people post 16 on vocational pathways, and we're now waiting for the final feedback on that. But there's definitely been a growth, and this is something that we really want to seek to expand in future years. But that first year program, has been very successful. As I said, there were limiting factors around how quickly we could grow some of that provision and knowledge of it, etc. But it's worked really well this year, and we're hoping to grow it again for the next academic year. And as you can see, I think I mentioned at the beginning, there's approximately 3,100 young people post 16 with an EHCP, and that translates to about 1,800 on a vocational pathway. And as I've said there at the start, there are some issues around growing that, but we aim for more young people coming from independent and out of county settings to join these programs. So one of the very specific scenarios that we've identified this year is that we've got young people who were placed out of county, often, in some cases a great distance in Surrey. Our current philosophy is that we would prefer young people to be based in Surrey wherever possible, but we've got a lot of young people either because of the level of their need or because there was a lack of the appropriate provision at the time that have been placed out of county in residential provision for many years, and they are going to come back to Surrey, and they're going to live their life in Surrey. But there is potentially sometimes an acclimatisation issue in returning to Surrey. There is often a need for a transition, not just in terms of their age and their need to move to a different program, but also, coming back to Surrey can be quite challenging when you've lived in another part of the country for many years. And one of the things we're definitely doing around these programs is seeking to create very local and specialised programs to support those young people when they come back, and to ensure that they are supported and transitioned, not just in terms of what they do in their adult pathway, but in terms of coming back to Surrey, where hopefully they will live out their lives in as much independence as they can and as successfully as possible. So some of the providers that we've used this year, and some of the programs that we've grown this year. So we commissioned additional places with Future Choices, which, as you know, many of you will know, as a provider, offers pre-supported internships and supported internships for young people, and the numbers there are up 50% on last year, and we've grown that program. We're waiting for the final college data to come back, but we're expecting similar numbers in GFE colleges to what we've had in previous years. We've expanded the Halo program, which I mentioned earlier, and I think I'll go into in more detail later. Aspiring Skills is a new provider that we've used for the first time this year, and their program's going very well. We definitely see that increasing in future years. And overall, we've increased the number of people accessing these types of programs significantly from previous years. One of the things that we're very keen to look at as we go forward is seeking to, as appropriate, either at 16 or 19, reduce the number of young people who are still on school programs. School is obviously fantastic, and there are many programs there post 16 which are entirely appropriate and we would support, but we can't, we don't think it's a good idea that young people remain in school beyond 19 into their 20s. There are very few schools, to be fair, that offer that, but we do need to work to transition young people into their adult world, and obviously no one can stay at school forever, and this is one of the things that we're looking at in terms of developing these alternatives. I think it's fair to say in the past that, and I know from conversations I've had with families over the course of this year, that young people post 16 are in schools, not necessarily because the family themselves felt that was the best option, but they were unaware, or there weren't sufficient alternatives that allowed them to look at other options. And that's one of the reasons why we're growing this offer, and why we're going to have more places for next year. So the progress and the plan around growing the Next Steps program for next year. Employers. So I think it's highly likely that many of the people watching this today might well be employers themselves. They might be interested in offering a place on one of the programs that I mentioned earlier. We're really keen to work with Surrey employers. We're doing a lot of work around that, going to employer events, etc., and selling the program and explaining to people the benefits of it. I think one of the things that a lot of employers have found is that diversifying their workforce and bringing people in with different experiences and different perspectives actually helps them as employers actually, get those different perspectives. Can also be opportunities. It can change the atmosphere in the workplace, and we've had some really strong and positive feedback this year from that program. But we're always looking for employers that we can work with. So if you are an employer and you're interested, or you know someone who you think might be, then please get in touch and let us know. So last year, the data tells us there was 1,461 young people post-16 who were on a college pathway or a program. And as I say, that's the 2019 data. We're expecting that to increase this year. And again, we're looking to expand the program next year. We are, as I said, redesigning the Next Steps program and the offer to better align with the Preparing for Adulthood outcomes. There is a national website, Preparing for Adulthood, where you can find an awful lot of material. And actually, I think we'll probably send that link around. I think it might be later in the presentation, but if not, I'll make sure we share that. And you can do your own research and find out, what that means and how best to navigate that and be prepared for any conversations you might have, for example, with case officers. And then, as I said, we're looking very much to expand the program that we've got, not just in terms of increasing the number of places that we commissioned with some of the providers listed there, but also by looking to work with any organisation that is offering these kind of vocational pathway programs and increasing our commitment, our spend and our resource with those providers, as I say, because one of the things we're keen to do is move away, especially post-19, from school provision and then move on to the next steps of young people and make sure that we've got enough of those places available to meet the demand. And we'll be providing more information about that as we get closer to the next academic year. So what we do in Surrey County Council. So one of the things I'm very keen on is that at the moment we don't have a SEND apprenticeship program within Surrey County Council. I am a very strong advocate of that. I believe that we definitely should have one. I'm sure, as you can imagine, the council's is a big organisation and there's lots to do, but this is definitely a program that we want to get in place in time for the next academic year. I think it's really important that we're seen to be offering those opportunities, and we'll provide more information on that as we go forward. But I'm very keen to create a SEND apprenticeship program within Surrey County Council with opportunities for Surrey residents to access that and then be trained and get the support they need to give them the confidence so that they can then go on into the world of employment. I ran a SEND apprenticeship program in a previous organisation, and we had a young man there who was incredibly passionate about Tottenham Hotspur. He was on a customer service apprenticeship, and we were actually able to place him in the Tottenham Hotspur ticket office because they were just wowed by his passion and his interest in the team. I'm not a big fan myself, but yeah, there are real opportunities there if young people are given the right support. But I think it's important that we as an organisation are seen to be supporting that ourselves. We would then, as I say, hope to expand it in future years, and it will hopefully lead to more opportunities for young people to go into the world of work and into employment. And that's exactly where we see many of the young people that we've got post-16 with an EHCP going to in the future. So I know I said at the beginning on the pie chart that there were only about 11% of the young people moving to adult services. But obviously, those young people who meet that threshold under the Care Act often have very high levels of need. And it's important that their transition into adult services is as smooth and as managed as possible. So my colleague Steve Hook will be doing a presentation on that more specifically, but I just thought it was important today to mention the work that we're doing with them. So one of the things we created last year in the transition team for adults was a small team that could work on early identification of needs in year 9 and year 11. And what that effectively means is under the Care Act, young people will be open to and then move into support from adult social care from age 18, from their 18th birthday. but what more could we do to understand the group that were on that pathway and get them better support? And part of that is around this indicative early identification. The team will come and visit young people, do an indicative assessment, and I think, give the family a sense of if that's what they want. If the young person is likely to meet the threshold for adult social care, and perhaps in some ways, or more importantly, that they're not, because I do think there is more we need to do for families to understand the difference between those two thresholds. And the sooner that for example, that your child may not be on a pathway to adult social care, that obviously then, as I've said, creates the scenario that the support that they get through EHCP will be finite at a maximum up to age 25. And then I think there can be a much more fruitful dialogue about what is the best what's the best program, what's the best support that they can receive during the period while they retain their EHCP. But even that, for young people who are on the adult social care pathway, that doesn't necessarily mean that we wouldn't support them on employment pathways if it's appropriate. But we just want to make sure that they have a smooth transition into adult social care. And for some young people in adult social care, they will continue on an education training pathway while they're being supported, for example, residentially by adult social care. But we would arrange this, as you like, in a managed way. But I think the key message for young people and families who are potentially on the adult social care pathway is that we're much more closely aligned with adult colleagues and working very carefully and very closely on managing the transition for those young people. As I say, it's a relatively small number of the overall group, but obviously, their level of need and support is generally much higher, and therefore we need to be much more focused and better aligned in terms of planning their transition. One of the key scenarios around employment is, of course, travel and independent travel. I think one of the things that we obviously have special educational needs transport in Surrey, and it does an amazing job transporting close to just over 6,000 children and young people a day. But for many young people, they will have been in that provision, understandably, because the school or the college or the program that they're on may be some distance away from their home, and they've got we have a statutory duty, and of course it's entirely appropriate that we provide transport. But again, coming back to that scenario that an EHCP is a finite resource, at some point it will end, and it's important that where it's appropriate and where young people can travel independently, we support them to do that. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, one of the big learnings, if you like, for something like a pre-supported internship or a supported internship is around, the culture of the workplace, the expectations around work. And one of those is that you travel independently, that you are able to get to your place of work at the agreed time and obviously get home or to wherever you're living, after work. And so this year we've created a pilot program around independent travel training for children and young people on SEN transport. And the idea is really that there will be a one-to-one program that will successfully transition 50 service users or clients who currently use SEN transport to travel independently. Will obviously pay any fares associated with that. They'll get a one-to-one program of support to support them to manage that journey and to acquire the skills enabling them to do that. We've got, as I say, about 3,000 young people on special educational needs transport in Surrey each day. So we're looking for families where they would see this as a benefit, that they, in effect, put their hands up and say that, my son, my daughter, or they themselves have said, either at post-16 or potentially in secondary phase, if it's appropriate and the journey is doable, clearly, we don't want, it might well be that the young person's skill set is such that, that they feel that's entirely appropriate and something they would like to do. But because of where they're placed, it'd be 2 trains or 3 buses or whatever, and it's completely unrealistic. So, we understand that. But for many young people, it's a really important skill set. It gives them an awful lot of freedom. If we do fund a train or a bus pass, we always fund the highest level one that allows them to travel evenings and weekends as well, if that's appropriate. And so, we are looking to support young people to make that transition. But as I say, in the first phase, it's a relatively small number of young people that will be able to access it. So we are looking for people who are interested in taking that forward, like to volunteer for, and say that this is something they would like to undertake. As I say, it's a one-to-one program, and there will be a support. Someone will be at the house in the morning to support that young person to travel to their school or college, and then obviously there in the afternoons to go back with them. And over time, they will then be trained to travel independently. And at the point where the family and the trainer agree that the young person is able to travel independently, then that's what they'll do. But they wouldn't do that until then. And obviously, not everyone who undertakes this program will be successful. And clearly, if at the end of the program, there's an understanding that for whatever reason at this stage, that young person can't travel independently, then they would go back to their previous transport arrangements. So, just wanted to make that clear. And as I say, we've signed up with Surrey Choices as our provider to deliver that program for us. It's the first year. It went live this month, October 2020, and the intention is that we'll grow that in future years. But we just wanted to start with the pilot program initially. And I want to emphasise it is one-to-one support. So for every young person that is on that program, they will have a dedicated trainer that will travel with them. I think I've covered a lot of this already, but as I say, it's a valuable life skill for employment. It's a tailored program. We could even potentially, look to buy equipment like a bicycle if that would help some young person, depending on where they are. The goal is to help them to train to travel independently and to give them the agency of choice, if you like, in terms of not just getting to and from their school or college, but also in terms of their ability to meet with friends, etc., and travel at weekends. So as I've said, that's a really important skill set that we've identified that many of our young people need, and where we've got young people who are interested in taking up that program, we'd be really interested in hearing from you. I've got some experience, some videos now that we're going to quickly go through. This is our independent travel training video with one of our young people, we work with Dom at Surrey County Council, and I'll press play and hopefully this will work. Okay, that doesn't appear to have worked. So I think what we'll do is we'll insert that video later. That's a video about Dom's experience with independent travel, and it's quite an uplifting, I think, an informative video. But unfortunately, it doesn't appear to be working at the moment. We'll move on to the next slide. This is really Surrey Choices program. It talks about the nature of the program and the people that have been on it. You can see there the outcome for the young people. Many of them have successfully progressed into paid employment, and they are able to access those things effectively. And they've been a really successful outcome, and many of those young people, I think it's fair to say, and their families would not necessarily have assumed that they would make the progress they've made, but they've done amazingly well. They've really embraced the program, and it's been incredibly successful. and obviously, we can't share their names, but you can see there that group from the last academic year has been really successful, and many of them have gone on either to the next from a pre-supported internship to a supported internship, or actually into full-time paid employment, which has been a fantastic outcome, and I think illustrates what I was saying previously around, the resources that we put in place really need to be aligned with the preparing for adult outcome that the young person wants to achieve. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it will be achieved in 1 year. It could be a tiered approach. In many cases it is, where it might be, a college program at 16, then moving on to a pre-supported internship at 17, a supported internship at 18, an apprenticeship at 19. It doesn't necessarily have to be that long, but I think it's really important that there's a program where everyone can see what the destination we're working to is, and there'll be an indicative timeline around that. But there may be very good reasons why, for whatever reason, they can't meet that timeline, and then they might need more time. And we'd be completely understanding that. But I think it's really important that it's a program that's leading to a destination, however long that program might be, rather than seeing it as segmented single year programs. And I think one of the issues has been in the past is that young people have embarked on a program at 16, 16, 17, year 12, then another program at 18, then another program at 19. And then, you'll realize that they're not necessarily aligned, and they haven't led to a destination. They've perhaps been 3 different programs at the same level. And then suddenly you look back and see the resource, the large amount of funding and resource that's been deployed, but it hasn't necessarily provided the progress that the young person would have hoped for or expected, or it wasn't aligned with their adult outcome. So that, maybe there was a specific sector that they're interested in, and it didn't work for that, or it might well be that it just wasn't appropriate to, their adult destination, and therefore, it could have been deployed better. And so one of the things, as I say, we're really trying to work to is a kind of planned arrangement at 16. But I want to be really clear, that doesn't mean it has to be a 1 year approach. It could be a multi-year approach where there'll be different milestones during that program that gets them to the place that they want to be. But I think it's really important that we've articulated jointly what that is, and we both understand we're working to the same outcome and destination. So this is a young man from Surrey Choices. He enrolled as a pre-supported internship young person on the Future Choices program. I should say, before I go any further, he has given us permission to use his photo and to share this information. He's diagnosed with autism and requires support in helping him manage his social interactions, channeling his energy to focus on achieving his goals. He enjoyed, well, I probably won't read that all out, but as you can see, he's done really well working in a gastropub. He's now made effective progress in the workplace, and he's got a placement, and now he's working, and he's really happy with the outcome. The family are really happy with the outcome, and he's now effectively on his adult pathway, and the program that he was on has really supported him to achieve that. And he's just one example of many of young people that we've supported to go on that kind of pathway and that journey. And it isn't just a question of the fact that they're getting some level of income. Obviously many of us at work will understand that the dignity of work and the structure of work is part of what we all enjoy as adults. And I think it's really important that the young people that we're supporting on these programs get the opportunity to experience that again where it's appropriate. Also, I should say, rather than again. There's another video here. I have I don't think the videos are going to work. So what we'll do is we'll edit this and insert those videos at a later date. It's unfortunate, but I really did want you to see the videos because it's young people telling their own stories, and it gives everyone a flavour of the programs that we're supporting, but also that the young people themselves are really enjoying the experience, and that they are you know, making real progress, and it isn't something that's been you know, that they're not enjoying. It is a program that they really enjoy. So the local offer on Surrey, which obviously you will know is the website, we created a brochure, if you like, a guide to the post-16 provision that was available locally for vocational pathways. We'll be updating that for the next academic year. That's available on the local offer website there. We've got the link there. It contains many of the links, and I think it allows families to do their own research and understand what the pathway might be for them, that they understand. As I mentioned earlier, we've got 4 further education colleges in Surrey that have a huge range of programs around things that can lead in terms of to a vocational or an employment pathway. And often I think their offer isn't as well understood as it could be. But also, as I say, you know, we've commissioned this year programs with Future Choices, Applying Skills, Halo, for programs that we want to increase for future years, and work with other providers to better, you know, make everyone aware of what that program is and how it works. So that brochure is available on the local offer website, and we'll be updating it as soon as we can. Okay, well, look, thank you very much for your time today. I'm sorry about the hiccup with the videos. They didn't work as well as we hoped they would. I'd be really happy to take questions from anyone and get your feedback on the programs and any suggestions you might have, how we can make this program work more appropriately. I really want to emphasize that, you know, I spent a lot of time today talking about employment pathways and around, you know, the pathway for the 84%. But what we really want to put in place is a next steps program that works for everyone, regardless of which pathway they're on, that prepares them for their adult destination and hopefully their aspiration. And we're open and upfront with families about the finite nature of an education, health and care plan, and that we're working with you to maximise the resource that's available and the support that's available to support those young people to get the adult outcomes and destinations that they want, so they can live fruitful and successful lives in Surrey. And I hope you'll agree that we've taken some important first steps over the past year. We acknowledge we've still got some way to go. We want as much feedback as possible to help us on develop those programs. But I definitely feel that we're moving in the right direction, and with your support and feedback, hopefully we'll be able to move it a lot further before we get to the next academic year in September 2021. Thank you again for your time today, and I please urge you to look at the videos if you get the opportunity, and obviously we'll make the PowerPoint and the links available with Family Voice, who have been incredibly supportive with us on this journey to make sure that that information is out there as wide as possible. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.